Hi, welcome to another Hustle UK episode in the series on how to set up a t-shirt business. In the previous episode, we just looked at a rough overview of how the business is going to operate, and we basically decided how we wanted it to operate. And one of the things we decided is we want to make the t-shirts ourselves rather than outsource them to a third party. In this video, we're going to look at the actual methods of how to print a t-shirt. And we're going to look at the pros and cons of a few different methods and then arrive on a preferred method that we're going to start out using. There's 5 main methods: screen printing, vinyl printing, direct to garment, using heat transfer paper, or sublimation printing. Going into screen printing is where a template is created through which emulsion is exposed on your t-shirt, which ends up binding it to the t-shirt, something similar to photo negatives. The great things about this is it's easy to mass produce a single design. It's very cost effective for large runs of designs, and it produces a high quality finish. The downsides of this, however, is that initially there is a bit of a setup cost. Now, a small screen printing setup will cost roughly around £200, but they obviously, as you can imagine, will get a lot more expensive depending on how much more you want to. Because obviously you're using emulsion, it can become quite messy. It's also not worth it for bespoke or custom orders, because for every single order you're going to have to create a new template. Furthermore, if you have a complex multicolored design, you need a different template for each facet of that design. So if you've got 10 different places, then you need 10 different templates. So it becomes unwieldy. So it's better not to use it for those such designs. You can if you want to, but it's just easier if you can't. I believe some industrial places do obviously use it, but that's their thing. Vinyl printing. So in vinyl printing, what happens is a design is created on the computer, and then the vinyl printer cuts the vinyl, and what you do is you take that vinyl out, similar to perforated paper, you punch it out, and then you use a heat press to seal that into the shirt. The great thing about this is it creates a high quality finish, and it's really good for bespoke and custom orders. Similar to the screen printing, there is a setup cost, and the cheapest vinyl printers cutters and vinyl printers I could find were starting around £200. The other thing is there is more of a setup that you have to do, because you have to make sure your vinyl cutter is inlined properly. On top of that, once it's done, then you have to get everything out of the vinyl. So if you can imagine, if you're doing a square, it still sits within your sheet of vinyl, it's just being punched out, and then you have to actually take it out, like simply, as I said, similar to perforation. Because of that, it can be quite fiddly to set up. And similar to the screen printing, as you can imagine, if you have a red, blue and green, then you need it to print the blue bits and the red bits and the yellow bits, and then you got to punch each one out, perforate them out, and then stick them on, and then use the heat press. So it can become a bit more, again, just simply similar to the screen printing, a bit unwieldy to do very complex designs. They are possible, but it's just a lot more time consuming. Now we have direct to garment printing. Direct to garment printing is where you have a printer that literally prints on a t-shirt. So you put your t-shirt in the printer and it'll print on it. The great thing about this is it's high quality. In my view, it is the best solution all around if you have the money, because it's less hassle, less time. It's good for both large orders and small orders, and it's good for simple and complex designs. The biggest downside of DTG printing is that the setup cost. To buy a DTG printer, the cheapest I could find, I think it was a second-hand one, was about £1,100. But to get a brand new one, from what I could see, some of them run all the way up to £15,000 to £20,000. So it's very, very expensive setup. It's not something you'd want to invest in unless you're 100% sure your business can take off. And as I said, the point of this series is for the ordinary person who has a 9-to-5 job, who has other commitments within their life, to be able to set up a business on the side. I do not think this is something that you'd start off with. This is something maybe you'd like to work up towards. One other thing about these type of printers is that some prep work needs to be done on the t-shirts, but again, it's not major, because most of the companies that sell them, they also sell machines that prep the t-shirts for you. The fourth option you can look at is heat transfer paper. This is where a design is printed onto heat transfer paper, and that print is just using a normal inkjet printer that you would have at home, and then using a heat press or an iron, you iron that design onto a shirt, and the heat transfers the ink from the paper to the shirt. The great thing about this is it's a low setup cost, low barrier of entry. It's good for complex designs, and it's relatively easy to undertake. Pretty much anyone can do this. You don't need like special skills, and it's good for bespoke and custom orders. The biggest downsides really are that you need to have a high quality printer, and you need to have high quality design, and you need to have a high quality paper, because otherwise it's just not going to look that good. On top of that, it's ideally easier to use with a heat press. So again, people who are starting off maybe using an iron, but it is just easier to use a heat press. And it's also gonna, there are incurred costs in this, in terms of the fact that obviously with other situations you are buying emulsion, you're buying vinyl, but they're much cheaper than heat transfer paper. Heat transfer paper can be quite expensive depending on where you buy it from and the quantities you buy it from. Naturally, if you buy more, the price does go down. The final one we're going to look at is sublimation printing. This is where a design is printed onto a sublimation printer paper using a special sublimation printer using special sublimation ink, and then a heat press transfers the ink from the paper to the shirt. It's better for large designs. It actually, a lot of the designs that you see where an entire t-shirt is covered in a design, that's often a sublimation printer. It's good for custom and bespoke orders. It's easy to actually use for different items, because one part of the process is the ink is made into gaseous form. Because of that, you can actually use it to put pictures onto mugs and helmets and whatnot. It's also strong and very long lasting because of the manner in which the ink binds, and it's relatively easy to do. The biggest downsides of this are, again, setup costs. The cheapest sublimation printers I could find were around about £200. Small designs are not as cost efficient because it goes into a gaseous form. It spreads out across the entire object. So if you want a small little logo in one corner, you're wasting a lot of ink to do that. Furthermore, you need a special ink for this, and that is in of itself much more costly. Now, having looked at all the different options, I think for this particular scenario, what we will do is we'll use the heat transfer paper, simply because it's low cost of setup and it's relatively easy to use. You don't need a lot of technical skill. It doesn't take up a lot of space. It's just a wad of paper, so it's not going to take a major amount of space. Imagine setting up a screen printing in a spare room, if you have a spare room, that is. If when we put out some generic designs, they start selling well, we may look into reinvesting the money and buying some screen printing gear to increase our output and decrease our costs. However, if by some crazy miracle there are lots and lots of orders, going into the thousands of pounds worth of orders, then I may actually just look into getting into DTG printer, because the time that will save and the hassle that will save is worth getting it. But as I said, that is maybe a long way down. I don't envision myself getting there, but I think this is the way someone should look at stuff. They should say, okay, what's the quickest way for me to get up and running now? A lot of people, they'll see stuff like printing a t-shirt, and the first thing they'll see is screen printing, and just looking at screen printing kind of puts you off a little bit, like, oh, what's going on here? Then you got to think about the money, you got to think about learning the techniques, and people are always looking for hurdles to stop themselves from doing things, and that's the issue with a lot of people. In fact, that's the issue with me. I wanted to actually start up a t-shirt business a couple of years ago, and that exact same thing happened to me, and I was like, I don't have time to learn about screen printing. I couldn't be bothered. Really, what's driven me is the fact that I found out about heat transfer paper, crazy as it may seem, because I only ever looked at this stuff in passing. I never really researched it. Once I finally researched it, and I was like, there's this thing called heat transfer paper. That's what I thought, right, let's try this and see how it goes. And that's my advice to everyone here, is that when you look at the people who have been the most successful in life, they're not successful because they got everything right the first time. They're successful because for every time they fell down, they got back up, and they didn't let other people bring them down, and they just carried on trying and trying and trying. You only need that one success. Out of 100 failures, you only need one success for everyone else to see you as successful. And that's unfortunately the nature of the world. That's the way the world works. And that's what you must remember. just try it. You've got literally nothing to lose. This is what the point of this series is to show you that with very little money you can start this. So you've all, like I said, you've got little to lose and a lot of stuff to gain. I hope this video was informative and useful. If it was, please like this video. If you have any queries, comments, if you have any tips, if you have any issues or problems, leave a comment below. And if you want to continue on this journey and see more videos similar to this, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you.